as a character in world literature called the idiot. He doesn't lie. He doesn't manipulate. He sees through everyone in the room and chooses again and again not to use what he sees. He treats servants the same as generals. He tells the truth when the truth costs him everything. The world around him calls him an idiot. That world is composed almost entirely of liars, performers, and people so lost inside their own constructed selves they've forgotten there was ever anything else. Here's the part Dostoevsky doesn't let you look away from. The idiot destroys everyone he loves, not despite his goodness, because of it. Myshkin arrives in St. Petersburg from a Swiss sanatorium. No money, no social map, no prepared version of himself. His first visit is to General Epanchin, a powerful man accustomed to people who come with agendas. The general begins assessing him the way powerful men assess strangers, looking for the angle. What does he want? What's he hiding? Myshkin answers everything directly. He admits he's poor. He admits he's been ill. He volunteers information no one asked for. He conceals nothing. The general is disoriented. Every tool he has for reading a person, every reflex for finding the game beneath the words, returns empty. There is no game. There is no beneath. What he's sitting across from is a person who arrived without armor. Petersburg has never seen this before. It doesn't have a category for it. Then there's General Ivolgin, decorated, authoritative, a compulsive liar. He tells Myshkin stories about his personal friendship with Napoleon. Elaborate, specific, entirely fabricated. Myshkin listens. He doesn't correct him. He doesn't signal to anyone in the room that he knows. He treats the general with complete seriousness. Not because he's naive. He's not. He sees the lie immediately. But beneath the lie, he sees something else. A man constructing a grander version of himself, because the real one has become unbearable to inhabit. Myshkin responds to that man, the one underneath, the one the general himself has almost stopped believing in. That's what the quote at the beginning of this video means in practice. He doesn't see who you are. He sees who you were supposed to be. And he speaks to that every time, without exception, even when it costs him. The question that starts forming, and Dostoevsky wants it to form slowly, is whether this is a gift or whether it is, in some precise sense, a kind of madness. Jung called it the persona, the constructed self, the version of you that functions in the world. He wasn't against it. He said the problem comes when you forget it's there. When the performance runs so long, you can no longer locate the performer. Every significant character in this novel is suffering from exactly that. Ganya, so identified with his ambition that he'll publicly humiliate himself to protect the image of someone who gets what he wants. Aglaya, so locked into the role of the brilliant, untouchable daughter, that genuine feeling becomes a threat to her own structure. Ivolgin, who has told his lies so many times, he no longer knows which memories are real. Myshkin has no persona. None. He is the same person in the servants' quarters as in the general's study. Same words, same attention, same quality of presence. Petersburg society registers this as illness because it has no other category for a person who refuses to perform. When did you last meet someone like that? When were you last like that? Research on radical authenticity. People who refuse to filter, who say what they mean in every room, consistently finds the same thing. They are isolated not because they are wrong, but because they are exposing. When someone in a room refuses to perform, everyone performing becomes suddenly uncomfortably visible. The construction shows, and people don't forgive that, not because they're cruel, but because no one wants to see their own architecture made visible by contrast. Myshkin doesn't judge anyone. He doesn't arrive with an indictment. He's simply and completely there, which is precisely what makes him so difficult to be around. Judgment would be easier. You can argue with judgment. You cannot argue with someone who just looks at you fully, without flinching, and doesn't need you to be different. No one hates him for this. Something more uncomfortable happens. They can't stop gravitating toward him, and they can't stop being destabilized by him. He is, in the most literal sense, too much to be near. Here is the scene that breaks the novel open. Myshkin is engaged to Aglaya, young, whole, capable of an actual life, and Nastasia Filipovna, a woman who has been destroyed by the people who were supposed to protect her, who carries her own ruin as a kind of identity, appears. The two women confront each other directly, each one asking Myshkin, in her own way, to choose. He cannot do it, not because he doesn't understand what's being asked. He understands perfectly. But he sees Aglaya's pain and Nastasia's pain with equal, devastating clarity. And he cannot rank one above the other. His compassion has no hierarchy. It is total or it is nothing. He goes to Nastasia, not because he loves her more, but because she is more broken, because in that moment she needs him more. Aglaya, who came to that meeting whole and hoping, leaves shattered. Nastasia, whom he tries to save by staying, will die anyway, killed by the very man she chose instead of Myshkin, because Myshkin's goodness was a kind of unbearable pressure she couldn't live inside either. He chose pity over love, and both women paid for it. Here is the thought that Dostoevsky is pushing toward, and that I don't think most readings of this novel have the stomach for. Pure goodness, goodness without edges, without the capacity for cruelty, without the ability to make the choice that hurts someone less in order to save them from something worse, is not a virtue in the world as it actually is. It is a kind of violence committed in slow motion. Myshkin cannot refuse anyone, cannot wound anyone even when a clean wound would prevent a catastrophe. His compassion is real, but it is also totalizing, and a compassion that cannot discriminate, cannot protect. It can only witness. The cruelty Aglaya needed from him, the cruelty of being chosen fully at the cost of someone else, was something he was constitutionally incapable of. So he gave her his presence, and then his absence, and called both of them love. Dostoevsky doesn't excuse this. He doesn't excuse Myshkin. He just shows you what happens. The saint moves through the world, and the world burns behind him. Not because he intended harm, but because sanctity, taken to its absolute, is incompatible with the ordinary brutalities that keeping people safe requires. The social mask isn't always pathology. Sometimes it's what allows you to make a decision, to say this and not that, to be with this person and not that one. The performance of self that psychology warns you against is also, in certain moments, what keeps the people around you intact. Myshkin never performs, he never edits, and the result is that he is the most honest person in every room he enters, and leaves destruction in every room he exits, not through malice, through a goodness so pure it had no understanding of its own weight. So was he the sanest person in the room? Yes, and also, it didn't matter. Sanity if we mean clarity of perception, honesty of feeling, absence of self-deception. Myshkin had it completely. The capacity to live among others without destroying them. That is something else entirely. Something that requires a degree of strategic dishonesty, of selective cruelty, of choosing who you are going to disappoint and being able to live with the answer. Dostoevsky's question, the one he never answers, is not whether Myshkin was good. He was. It's whether goodness of that kind is something the world can hold, or whether every age produces its Myshkin, watches him move through with that unbearable clarity, and breaks him quietly, without anyone being the villain. The novel says, look at what we do with people who see us clearly and refuse to look away. Look at what we do with people who won't perform. Then look in the mirror and decide which side of that you're on. If this is the kind of question you want to keep sitting with, where literature stops being literature and starts being a mirror, there's more coming. Leave something in the comments. Not about Myshkin. About the last time someone's clarity about you made you want to leave the room. That's the conversation I'm interested in.